with the movie Doctor Strange? Raise your hand. A few more. Okay. Doctor Strange is a superhero in the Marvel comic book series. They just made a movie about him, for those of you who don't know, and Ren and I watched it this week. And I think it is safe to say that he is pretty much my favorite superhero. Like most superhero movies, when this one begins, you're introduced to an average human character who eventually becomes a superhero through some weird occurrence. Dr. Stephen Strange, at the beginning of the movie, is an excellent neurosurgeon. And there is no one in the world who knows that more than he does. He is cocky, arrogant, he thinks he's invincible, and quite frankly, he probably became the skillful neurosurgeon that he was, not because he really wanted to heal people, but mostly to stroke his own ego. This is the type of guy we're talking about. Well, one night on his way to a gala, he's in a horrific car accident, and it leaves all of the bones in his hands shattered. By losing his hands, he loses pretty much everything. And no matter the number of surgeries, or bouts of physical therapy, or the world's best medical attention, he could not get the steadiness in his hands back. At the end of his rope, Stephen meets a man who has just recovered from a serious back injury, the kind that most people don't recover from. And this man gives him the name of a place in Nepal, where he went to seek a more holistic kind of healing because he didn't think his back would ever get well, so he wanted some sort of spiritual healing. And he lets Stephen know that the spiritual capabilities that he learned to tap into while in Nepal were really quite limitless in what they offered him. But he decided to refrain from that, to just accept that his back was healed and to return to his normal life. And if Stephen were to go to Nepal, he would have to make the same decision for himself. So Stephen goes, and sure enough, he meets a woman called the Ancient One, who teaches him that his own spiritual capabilities and the spiritual capabilities of the universe makes for a much bigger reality than Stephen ever anticipated. And throughout the movie, this Ancient One, she tries to teach Stephen that the world needs him, if it ever has a chance of stopping evil that's about to encroach upon it and kill the world, as most superhero movies do. Throughout the movie, Stephen undergoes all kinds of spiritual training to tap into this world Stephen seemingly knew nothing about. And even though he progresses at this tremendous rate, even though he sees what kind of power he's really capable of, he wrestles almost the whole movie with whether to take his newfound abilities and just to heal his hands and go back to a life of self-aggrandizement, or to actually use his spiritual power to heal the world. Dr. Strange and Nicodemus find themselves in a strikingly similar position with a similar choice to make, in my opinion. Nicodemus was a Pharisee, which meant that he was a high-profile Jewish religious leader, and in the Roman system that they lived in, they put the Jewish religious leaders in charge of the temple, which meant that they were also in charge of many government procedures, because the primary place that the government ruled was in the temple at that time. And so the Pharisees had to do things like collect incredible amounts of taxes from the working class, which often made the poor poorer and the few rich richer. They ruled over the people according to the expectations of the Roman Empire, which often made them do things that weren't very fair at best, and really downright cruel at worst. And they used theology, they used their belief in God to justify it all, because they said that since all of this was happening in the temple, that clearly this is what God intended for the Israelite people. This so that they could take land in order to pay back the Roman Empire. Now, the Pharisees were not bad people. In fact, they were caught between the rock of their leadership in the Roman Empire and the very hard place of their religious morals. But they usually succumbed to the empire, and did so quietly because they knew what they'd lose if they spoke up. It's likely why, in this scripture passage, Nicodemus comes to Jesus in the secret of night. Nicodemus knew there was something different about Jesus, that Jesus had this unique spiritual connection to God. He knew that the spiritual power found in the baptism Jesus was offering was different from the power he had received from the empire. And Nicodemus wanted to experience it because, as it turns out, the Roman Empire's promise of power and prestige wasn't all it was cracked up to be for Nicodemus. But the Roman government didn't like Jesus. They didn't like him because he challenged the status quo of where power and wealth and domination should reside in the kingdom. And so Nicodemus kept quiet and lived for himself. Throughout Jesus' ministry, though, he didn't go to the wealthy. He didn't live for himself. He visited poor communities and brought to them the good news of a different kind of kingdom that they could be baptized into. They all knew about this concept of baptism. The temple did it all the time. As an adult, you could be baptized into the Jewish community if you believed in two things. One, the God of Israel, and two, in the law. If you cooperated in the law of the temple. But for Jesus, being baptized into a community wasn't just about believing the right things. And it wasn't about living into the temple law that had been corrupted in order to ensure a life of safety or wealth or prestige. In fact, the power in baptism wasn't about Nicodemus or what he could get out of it at all. Baptism was about receiving a kind of spiritual power to live in community with one another in a new way. In a way that prioritized someone other than Nicodemus. Jesus took baptism to a whole new level because being baptized into the kingdom Jesus spoke about, in being baptized into that community, the whole community is supposed to flourish and be prioritized. Not just Nicodemus and not just the Pharisees. To be baptized into Jesus' kingdom meant that Nicodemus, like Dr. Strange, had to make a choice about how he was going to exercise this power in baptism and how he was going to live into it. Was he going to live for himself? Or was he going to live for the good of others? We've been talking about our baptismal covenant through Lent and what it actually means. And when we are baptized, the second thing we're asked is this. Do you accept the freedom and power God gives us to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves? Now, John Wesley, the man that we associate with founding Methodism, believed that baptism was significant for our Christian faith. It was a sign of God's covenant to us. It was a means by which God's grace is poured out into our lives. And it's this grace, in the moment of baptism, that equips us and strengthens us to make a commitment to God, not just in what we say, but in how we live out our lives, how we live into a new birth or a new life that prioritizes care of all over care for just ourselves. In baptism, when God's grace is poured out over us, we come to the realization of just how much God loves and forgives us. And Wesley believed that the only response when we really understand that is to turn toward God and one another and offer the same. Of baptism, Wesley said in a sermon, it implies such a continual, thankful love to him who hath not withheld from us his Son, his only Son, and makes it natural and in a manner necessary to us to love every child of man, and fills us with bowels of mercies and kindness and gentleness and long-suffering. In baptism, and take for ourselves, and instead to turn and give to others, because that's exactly what Christ did for us. This is often why we speak about death in the act of baptism. When we are baptized, in a very real sense, like Christ, we die to ourselves, and we are invited to turn and to live a new way, to live into a new birth or a new life where we turn toward the needs of others so that all of life, ours and theirs, can flourish the way that God intended and the way that Christ makes possible. But we know that this is hard. The choice between working for our own flourishing and the flourishing of the world is a hard one, even with the spiritual power God gives us by pouring out grace into our lives, because we know that it requires us to give up things that we want. The battle that waged for Dr. Strange and for Nicodemus is the same battle that we wage through every day. We can all think of things that our faith calls us to give up, or how our faith calls us to live differently. And it's hard to muster the energy or the courage or the strength to do that. In fact, I think that's why Wesley made the distinction between the sacrament of baptism and new birth. He makes a distinction between these two things. In Wesley's sermon on the new birth, he says that baptism is not new birth. Baptism itself is not this new way of life. It's not in baptism that we're given some magical capabilities to surrender our desires without any difficulty. Those things are still difficult. But in baptism, we are given the grace to try and try again. And the new birth happens when we make a choice to live into that grace and to choose to live our lives for the sake of someone other than ourselves. I think that's why Wesley often baptized both adults and infants. If you're sitting here as an adult and you're thinking, I was baptized as an infant, but I don't know if I ever really made a commitment. Do I need to be baptized again? Or maybe you're an adult who was baptized and you just feel like a need to sort of recommit yourselves, because that's what happens sometimes. We have to recommit ourselves to who God is. Do I need a redo? Do I need to be rebaptized? Well, Wesley would have said no. You don't need to be rebaptized, because baptism is about God's grace and God's action, and there isn't anything that you can do that would change that. But Wesley also believed and recognized that at some point we do have to make a choice to follow Jesus in this new way of life. At some point we do have to turn away from ourselves and toward the other. And maybe that happened for you in your baptism. Or maybe it happened for you in confirmation or at some other point as an adult. Frequently throughout our lives, we have to continue to make that choice again and again, to recommit ourselves over and over, which is why we're giving you the opportunity at Easter to recommit yourself if that's what you feel you need to do. We don't talk in the church enough about how, as Christians, we need to recommit ourselves to our faith again and again. Our baptism, or the choice we make one time, isn't a one and done. It's something that we continually have to recommit ourselves to, because we all struggle with the temptation to live for ourselves. It's the human condition. And I want to play you a clip this morning from Dr. Strange, because we see this in this clip, a very real tension or struggle with this human condition. To give you a heads up of where we are in the movie, Dr. Strange is about to go head-to-head with some evil, as most movies like this go. And in a previous battle, his teacher, the Ancient One, gets hurt. And she's about to die. Spoiler alert, she's going to die. But we're going to have an exchange, and I want you to listen to this exchange.
Time?
Time is relative. Your body hasn't even hit the floor yet. I've spent so many years peering through time, looking at this exact moment, and I can't see past it. I've prevented countless terrible futures, and after each one there's always another, and they all lead here, but never further.
You think this is where you die?
You wonder what I see in your future?
No. Yes.
I never saw your future, only its possibilities. You have such a capacity for goodness. You always excelled, but not because you crave success, but because of your fear of failure.
That's what made me a great doctor.
Precisely what kept you from greatness. Arrogance and fear still keep you from learning the simplest and most significant lesson of all.
Which is?
It's not about you. When you first came to me, you asked me how I was able to heal Jonathan Pangborn. I didn't. He channels dimensional energy directly into his own body.
He uses magic to walk.
Constantly. He had a choice to return to his own life or to serve something greater than himself.
So I could have my hands back again. My old life.
You could. And the world would be all the lesser for it. I've hated drawing power from the dark dimension. But as you well know, sometimes one must break the rules in order to serve the greater good.
Mordo won't see it that way.
Mordo's soul is rigid and unmovable, forged by the fires of his youth. He needs your flexibility, just as you need his strength. Only together do you stand a chance of stopping Dormammu.
I'm not ready.
No one ever is. We don't get to choose our time. Death is what gives life meaning. To know your days are numbered, your time is short. You'd think after all this time I'd be ready. But look at me, stretching one moment out into 1,000, just so that I can watch the sun.
For Dr. Strange, he struggled with whether to live for himself or the world because he knew just how much it would cost him to go up against evil. We hear him say in this clip as he struggles, "You mean I could use my power to heal my own hands and go back to my life?" And he struggles right up until this very moment, when he watches the Ancient One give herself up for him and everyone else so that the world might flourish. It's like in that moment he sort of dies too, only to himself. For Nicodemus, he struggled with whether or not to live for himself right up until the day that Jesus gave himself up for him and everyone he knew. And Nicodemus had to carry him down from the cross and feel the full weight of his sacrifice. It was like in that moment Jesus died, so did Nicodemus. Being on the receiving end of such a sacrifice is a funny way of giving people the strength they need to choose how to live going forward. In baptism, we experience the grace of God who would give up everything for the sake of our flourishing. And we are given the freedom and the power to choose how we respond to God. And perhaps, like Dr. Strange, you are wrestling this morning with whether to serve your own life or something greater. We're given the power to choose. But God's greatest hope for us is that we would use that freedom and power to choose to live the way God originally created us, for the sake of one another. And in the words of the Ancient One, you could choose yourself.